everyone. Welcome to CTN. To learn more about the show, please visit CIOTalkNetwork.com. And today's topic is a pressing one, a current one, which is solving the quiet quitting crisis. So if the workers are not having clarity about their respective roles, they don't see growth prospects, and feels nobody cares for them, they could definitely become disengaged, either actively or passively. Nothing new there. But there is an uproar about this new crisis, which is quiet quitting crisis, where there are reports being shared across the world that most workers are just doing what they are told to or what their job said, nothing over and beyond, which was a sign of them being great employees. So what is causing this? What is the solution? Is this even a problem? Let's talk about all of that. We have guests today, George Varghese, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer with Shahi Exports. Hey, George, how are you?
I'm great, Sanjog. Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Great to have you, George. And we also have Paulo Sa, who's the CIO for Iberia, DB Schenker. Hey, Paulo, how are you?
Hi, Sanjog. Nice to be here with you and all the listeners.
Thanks again. So see, George, let's start with you as my first question. Before we say quiet quitting becoming a crisis, let us talk about the phenomena which is being used as a basis of defining that it's a crisis, that, hey, the workers are doing only what was on their job description. They're only doing to meet what was supposed to be the criteria set, even that was as a performance appraisal. Why is this being defined as a crisis? Is there something implied that while I will give you a certain standard, but you have to do double of that for you to be considered a good employee?
So, Sanjog, I think it's important to understand this concept from a couple of decades back. So, if you see the trend of employee engagement and its measurement, it would be started in an organized manner around 3 decades back, with Gallup, Hewitt, and other large players coming up with the engagement model, and companies participating in them to understand how engaged the workforce is. If you see most of these models, they already have this cover in different names. Obviously, quiet quitting has now become a fashionable name thanks to pandemic. But if you see long back also, if you look at the Hewitt model, we have a category of employees called actively disengaged. So it's nothing but similar to quiet quitting in terms of the nature of those employees, right? And contribution to work. What I believe is that this has become a big issue now because of the pandemic-induced distraction. Now, allow me a minute to explain that. So earlier, people used to go to work, and work was a primary aspect of getting income to work, to home, and it was a critical part of their lives. A pandemic induced 2 years of kind of work from home or doing things which is away from work. I'm sure all of us have spent more time with our families, quality time with our families during pandemic, which we were otherwise not able to do when we were at work because we were forced to be at home. And many of us found a deep impact and a value in doing so. So I think pandemic has induced a lot of thinking process in people's mind. For example, all of us dependent on our jobs as a primary source of income. But pandemic kind of made us realize that the second income is also important. So hence the concept of moonlight. So I think these are concepts which was already there. However, it has become very pronounced because of pandemic. But this was always there, right?
So it was always there. That is not a revelation, but it was happening, yes. So why the hue and cry? So to that, Paulo, what have you seen? While you're a CIO, but I'm sure you have the finger on the pulse of the whole organization that you lead, even from an IT standpoint, whether it's your team or the overall organization. What are you seeing as are the signs which says, oh my God, sky's going to fall because people are not being themselves. They're not going the extra mile.
I would tell you that I agree with George. This is nothing new. This is something that happened since always. And with the pandemic, we could understood that at least our experience that many of our colleagues, the big majority of them, could have a better work-life balance, but producing more than before. Okay, because if we consider that in the big metropolitan areas, you have to spend at least a couple of hours to commute from your home to your work each day. And since you were with the pandemic in lockdown in home, at the same time that you were spending more time with your family, you were taking additional time to work. So in my view, the pandemic was not increasing the quiet quitting or any other of the other denominations that we use in the past. And this is not only about IT, this is all across the different products and functions in the company.
So, George, one side is we looking at a couple of decades ago trend and then now. But what are the people saying? Because perhaps they don't see that they are acting any differently. And if someone who is a sincere worker and they have to juggle more priorities because they're at home, or maybe sometimes I would say like now more and more companies are inviting people back into the workforce and they have that challenge as well. What are these people saying has changed because of which they don't feel they should do twice the amount of time or twice the amount of put in, twice the amount of effort? What's their take on all of this?
I think it's a very fine boundary. Work-life balance is a positive theme. However, quiet quitting is a negative theme. Where does a boundary blur? I think as long as we are honest to our jobs, we deliver our goal sheets. I don't think the management is going to see it as quiet quitting. They will see it more as work.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. I always consider that if it is win-win, if the thing is good for the people and is good for the company, what is the problem? Okay. Of course, in any reality, we have different type of people and the leadership more than the shifts. So the leadership style is the key point on it, because I believe that no company that wants to live and be in the business for decades or even more should be happy to make the life of the workers only focus on business. So if you are a long-term player in any business, you for sure you want a work-life balance and you want that the relationship should be win-win for both the company and the employees.
Also, to just add, so where I was coming to was now from an employee's perspective, due to pandemic, the work from home, I think the work timing boundaries blurred, and we have seen empirical research after pandemic that people work more than 9 hours, probably 10, 12, 14 hours also in some industries like technology, where, because they were at home, ended up stretching more and more. The balls went on and on without breaks. And somewhere it crossed the boundary of work-life balance. And hence people also started becoming more pronounced in their need for a break, their need to have a boundary between work timings and their own personal timing. And that kind of led to a management feeling that people are trying to cut off from work. So I think both aspects are there. On one side, there is a section of people who are trying to take advantage of this, because obviously pandemic has also led to a red table concepts like great resignation, crunch for talent in some industries. So people have taken advantage of this also. But I think majority of the employees had this issue of work timing boundaries getting blurred and overstretching and leading to a terrible work-life balance issue, which forced them to put those boundaries in place, telling the manager that this is not my work time and I cannot take the call at this time, etc.
But don't you think, George, that this is good for the company as well, if that these boundaries will be somehow in place?
Absolutely. So that's the whole point, Paulo. If I'm very clear what is the deliverable for that resource. And let me tell you honestly here, many companies, even today, even though they have fancy technology systems and ERPs and HRMSs in place, they may not have a great goal sheet in place, right? So it's one thing to have technology and another thing to have a mature goal sheet. And that would invariably lead to a manager getting into micromanagement, seeing in whether they are engaged or not, etc. And it'll lead to all these kind of concepts coming into place. As long as the employee is delivering on his core and he's engaged on a regular communication performance check-in with the manager, I don't think this white quitting will come into the relationship.
Absolutely. I think that I fully agree with you that it's more a key topic about the leadership than about the workforce. I don't think it's an issue with the workforce.
So, George, one quick question. When you look at goal sheet and the manager working with them, and then that becomes the basis of us saying whether a person is engaged or not. But isn't there some sort of an intrinsic motivation which should drive it versus only when we inspect something and a person works when... So if a person starts doing only things when no one is looking, isn't that the utopia we are seeking? Or we have to submit to the fact that's never going to happen, and that's why we have to put these command and control?
It works both ways. In one sense, my goal sheet can have operational deliverables and innovation deliverables, right? So if I am innovating at my workplace and I'm getting recognized for it or rewarded for it or even a pat on the back for it, I will be motivated to do that more. But if that framework of recognizing and rewarding people is missing, then over a period of time, it is quite human for people to find doubts over a period of time. So I think it's not like we can't see it in a straight jacket that people should stretch more and bring more on the table. And I'm sure we have clearly those performance standards in place where if you see typically in any company in an appraisal or year-end salary increase schedule, there is very less population of employees who get promoted. And people who get promoted are invariably people who have gone above and beyond. And that doesn't mean that a large population of people who are actually delivering on their goal sheet, they are also equally important. They are delivering what is required and hence they are valued and they will get the usual salary increment which is required to ride over the inflation and market challenges. But the disproportionate reward always goes to people who go above and beyond. These concepts we have already put in place, right? So it works both ways. People engage more with the company engages more with them. It's vice versa.
So, Paulo, based on what George said, we are in a way set a precedence long time back and we're sticking to it, is that if you want to be more, you have to do more. But there is a human endurance to doing more. So at what benchmark, if set, a person will continue to run this marathon and not get burnt out and at some point not quietly quit?
I'm a very pragmatic guy, okay? So in my view, in our days, you have to be effective on the goals targeting, okay? So you cannot target goals that you will always increase a little bit more depending on the person that you have in front of you. So what I mean is we need to do a clear evaluation of each colleague, each employee, what is the career plan that we have to them, and to understand what is their limitations. Okay, so of course there are limitations that we can surpass using training, using mentoring, but there are some limitations on each one of our teammates that you cannot surpass, and they have a limitation. And it's a nonsense if you just look to the next quarter results and you just go and push more each one of the individuals. So what I pretty believe is that the challenge that we as a leaders have in our days, it is to make a proper management of each one of our teammates at each level. If you have a clear view on the capabilities of each person, you can make a reasonable improvement on the performance of that person. Otherwise, if you will put the pressure each time a little bit more, it will not work on the long run, and you will lose not only one person, but you will start to lose all the team.
George, if you had a way, how would you change the benchmark of acceptable performance knowing that something's changed during pandemic? Something's fundamentally shifted for all of us so that we take this crisis also as an opportunity to reset our expectations and also help these people to be humans and not just a cog in the wheel.
So to start with, Sanjog, I think it is very important for the leadership, be it in any industry. Typically, these concepts are mostly used in technology, IT, those kind of industry where remote working, hybrid, etc. is an acceptable benchmark now. But I come from a very traditional industry like manufacturing, where a person is actually required to be on the machine for productivity to come on. But I'm of the opinion that you be in any industry, but today I think you need to be flexible and you need to be open for change. The changes which are happening at a macro level in the society, you are also affected by it, whether you want to accept that or not. And the new workforce, the millennials or the Gen Z, as we their way of looking at job has fundamentally shifted. My generation came for work for getting more money, benefits, etc. We wanted to send financial status, and all that is done. Now, if my kids are entering into industry work, they don't need to look at their basic thing. That's all done for them. What they look for is quality of life. They take hobbies very seriously. So their lifestyle is totally different. Their needs are totally different. So organizations cannot have those traditional practices of rewarding and recognizing. They need to look at things differently. For a millennial, money doesn't motivate. But let's say if you are taking them for a trekking off-site and doing goal setting, that really excites them, right? So most of the team building and goal setting exercises today happen in off-site location in a very off-site setting. Why? Because the closed rooms and conferences rooms kill their thinking process, right? So I think the organizations need to redesign the way they work and the way they look at employees going forward. So that fundamental shift has definitely happened. For example, in manufacturing, typically we want people to come on time, go on time, and all that. But today people are increasingly asking for flexibility. So we need to be open for that. We need to work on adjusting our productivity metrics and our way of working to ensure that we also respond back to the needs of this new generation.
But George, let me challenge a little bit what you stated, because I agree with you. This generation is quite different from the ones that like ours, that when we start to work, we had a clear focus, more basic needs, let's say like that. But it's true that the money don't have the same importance that it had for me or for you during many years. But one of the key points in my thinking is if one day we have a big crisis that it seems that will come up, don't you think that the money will again be as a basis need, that the people will start again to think more in the basics if they start to see that the unemployment rate is increasing, there are companies shutting down and so on? What is your thoughts about it?
Typically, you see all the surveys that have happened globally, even quite some time back and recent ones also. Money has never figured in the top 3 as a retention tool. It is always the quality of work or the manager or the other reasons which has clearly come out. Money is important, definitely, but it is not important to the extent of influencing a person's decisions long term. This is what, all market surveys have shown us over a period of time. But money, an interesting characteristic about money is that it also has its own way of correcting over a period of time. If you see recent developments in the US, large tech companies are laying off people en masse, right? So what had happened in the last 10 years, companies have skyrocketed in that industry because hiring was happening left and center. There was a lot of competition for talent, etc. Now suddenly you have a large workforce available. Money will correct itself. So money always has this habit of correcting itself. Whereas the other parameters, which is about the engagement, the connect with the person, relationship between manager and employee, quality of work, this always will be a differentiator. Money can never be a differentiator. It can only differentiate to a very short period of time. our money, we get used to it in a very fast time, and we change our lifestyle to get adjusted to that. So definitely money can only add, but it cannot retain. This is what I believe.
Let's take a quick break, listeners. We'll be right back after these messages. And let's talk about how we could co-create a solution working along with these employees who themselves want to be feeling good about themselves, I'm sure. Everyone who wakes up doesn't want to say, I want to be a jerk or I want to be a slacker. Everyone wants to maximize their potential. So what is the way we could include them in redefining how performance is going to be looked at, how it's going to be measured, and what should an employee experience be like so that it is fulfilling? Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Today, enterprise technology is both strategic and global. Each week on CTN CIO Talk Network, IT thought leaders from around the world share their experience with listeners as they discuss with Sanjog Aul how they are trimming costs and partnering with business to innovate and help IT become more competitive, better care for customers, and improve the corporate bottom line. If you want to keep up with IT thought leadership, listen to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul at CIOTalkNetwork.com. You are listening to CTN CIO Talk Network with Sanjog Aul. To learn more about our program, please visit CIOTalkNetwork.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. Paulo, if you were to think about co-creation, where the idea is that you tell that this is what we would like to do, but frankly, we also admit that we don't have all the ideas. So that means we invite employees themselves to share. How could we create the new benchmarks, the new ways of making that employee experience the most valuable and all along not jeopardize or rather increase the value they can deliver to business? How would something like that be orchestrated in your view?
If you have a clear picture on why we are on the business, what is our purpose, I think that automatically you can have a motivation from the team to understand where they want to go. Of course, this is only the start. Afterwards, you need to be allowing the employees to make mistakes. This is a key factor, that if they understand that not everything that they will design or think in new solutions will work. Some will, but many of them will won't. You will create basis for the team to create this new co-work that you were speaking about. So basically, in my view, it is first of all to have a clear picture of why we are in the business, and secondly, to allow them to make mistakes. So this is one of the key points in my view.
George, have you tried to do something like this in terms of bringing them in and saying, okay, what's your vision of the next 10 years of you working here or anywhere? And how can we make that happen? Has that conversation happened? And if yes, how did it go?
Very established practices already in the engagement field. Town halls, for example. And we do town halls, the management communicates with people on how the last quarter has gone by, what we can expect in the coming time, where we are going, what are the new areas of business we are getting in, etc. That's nothing but aligning people into the company's growth path or the future path. And it definitely motivates people to associate and walk in the same journey. But I think if we have to look at it more from a masses perspective, which is basically, obviously the purpose and vision is very critical. But I think if you really look at the millennials and the the young workforce, I think quality of work, that is something very critical today. If you give good quality of work, they get excited and they stick. Second, I think is performance check-ins, the periodic and timely chit-chat between manager and employee. This is very important. We are all busy at our work, and seldom managers realize that they're not spending quality one-on-one time with their direct reports. unless there is a need for a quarterly review or a half-yearly review or an annual review. So how do we systemically set up those processes where there is a constant check-in between the manager and the employee? Third is, how do we give job rotation or role rotation to people, new projects, new challenges? I think consistently we need to renew their work experience every 2 to 3 years. Gone are the days when a person was willing to do the same work for 10 years. Today, in a year, 2 years, people get bored, and then obviously they look for more challenges. Second is, this is from the work front. From the organizational standpoint, how do we look at our policy framework to empower people rather than police them? This is very important because most of the policies have been written quite some time back and we stick to it. Also, instead of annual policy review, rewards teams should look at quarterly policy review and they should be updated with time. And I think if we do all this, we should be able to get some solution to this. But as we are just reeling out of the pandemic and now markets are opening up and the businesses are looking good, at least in this part of the world, we are seeing quite a bit of action. This is going to be a tough thing to do.
So one area, George, this is for you. So disappointments can come from many directions, right? You tried to do something and you felt that your boss will appreciate, they did not, you're disappointed. You thought you will get a promotion, you did not, you get disappointed. And there could be many others. And you may not always, when you're disappointed, you are not that objective at all times, right? That's at the end of the day, emotional response. And that is what creates quiet quitting, and that also creates quitting. Being in the HR role for many decades, I believe that you've played this role. Have you figured out a way to see some signs and then tackle them proactively? And can you truly say you can remove disappointments altogether? Or there is a better way to handle those disappointments so that people don't allow it to fester and create resentment and eventually either stop working, quite quit, or quit?
Hey, I will actually give a pragmatic answer to that. 80-20 rule always works. 20% of the people always deliver 80% of the results. This is true in the past and it is true now and it will be true for future also. And the resources which an organization have is also limited. We can't develop everyone, we can't promote everyone, we can't give money to everyone. So even the ability of the organization to focus on resources are limited. Hence, a good to that I always suggest is that when you launch new projects, new exercises, new challenges, watch out for people who enthusiastically take it down and look for people who always want to do extra. And they will always be far and few, right? And how do you create a healthy competition within your team to make more such, as we call as actively engaged employees? We need to keep pushing those boundaries and ensure that more people come into the quadrant of actively engaged. And engaged is also made, but not having been disengaged. But you will always have certain population of the people who will be in that quadrant. And obviously you have to keep on identifying and churning proactively to ensure that the organization tides through this.
Paulo, when you have looked at, and I'm going to have you wear two hats. One is you lead the team, so you got people who report to you and you have to take care of them. Second is you're also running IT, and for your organization, I'm sure IT in some form or fashion also provides some insights or some ways to make this whole problem a little more manageable. What have you seen from both sides, the kind of strategies and some on-the-ground tactics which have helped your organization do a better job and you a better job in terms of managing your own team?
Yeah. No matter the technology that it's in place, I do believe that what do the difference, the soft skills, the relationship among the teams. George already mentioned a couple of things that in my experience shown that delivers the results and keep the colleagues motivated. If you keep one-to-one calls periodically where you can openly discuss with them that performance, the way the targets that we have, the way the organization is moving forward, and so on. This is a key factor. No matter if you use a paper, a small sheet of paper to do it, or if you use a very high sophisticated system that can manage all the team. Okay, so this, for me, this is a clear point. If you, technology for sure help a lot, it can make the process smoother and more efficient, but the key to keep the team motivated and engaged with the company, it's more on the way you keep the relationship with them. Okay, and as George mentioned, nobody, first, you don't have a chance to promote all the team. No, for sure not. And nobody, and not all the people wants to be promoted. So the key is how to understand how to motivate each one and how to get each one of the persons engaged with the solutions. Okay. In terms of technology, of course, during the pandemic, for example, companies like ours that were already using conference systems with video, not only with audio, but with video, helped a lot to keep the relationship between each parties on a better way. But again, it's helped, but it's not the solution for the case.
A very interesting point you have brought in, Paulo. I think one of the behaviors that I have seen in the last 2 years when we have actively engaged in remote working is that people refuse to come on video. It's mostly audio. I feel the engagement levels, the connect, the contribution, and the passion of the call is at a very different level when you can see someone face to face than only hearing their voice. Yeah, so some companies actually have, as a bonus, they've said that video is mandatory in all the calls. The issue becomes if that is work time of 8 hours, it becomes 12 hours, then yeah, video becomes a distractor for the employee and their families. And that's why I said that balance is the key. As long as we are maintaining the balance, it's absolutely enough.
I agree. But George, in my view, the Tory is not the solution, okay? What I can tell you, when we started with the pandemic, I would say that more than 90% of the people only were with audio, not the picture, okay? And if you start yourself giving the example, putting always your picture, and then suddenly the people will start to change and they will say, hey, if the boss is putting the picture, why shouldn't I put as well? And then you lead by example and you don't force anybody to do it. They will take the initiative to do it. And this is, as I said, very important small details that, of course, technology helps. But in my view, the way you lead the relationship with the team, it's the key factor for the success.
Absolutely. We have to motivate them towards it. Yes.
George, have you seen anything on the ground, a strategy, tactic, whatever you tried deploying actually worked to tackle this quiet quitting issue?
Important thing is to analyze the distractors, I feel. So what are those distractors which is pushing people to become quiet quitters? If we are able to analyze that and then take a systemic solution to that, I think it should work fine. For example, in our case, we were pretty hung up on people coming on time and going on time. And given the way everybody has gotten back to work, traffic is extremely worse. So employees raised that as a concern, and we as a management met and immediately decided to give flexibility to people in terms of coming and going, so that we ensure that whatever lesser hours we have for meeting, etc., are more productive. And obviously, when employees got that flexibility, they are also able to contribute more when they are at work. So I think it's an ongoing process. And as and when we see issues cropping up, as a management, we have to keep on solving it. Slowly, the demon of quiet quitting will come and over.
Paulo, anything you tried or your HR tried?
First of all, I would like to point out one important thing. This is not, in my opinion, this is not an HR decision. This is a decision that must be committed to all the management team. Otherwise, it won't work, okay? We did similar things as George was saying, putting some minimum and maximum for the entrance and the leaving of each employee. We allowed it flexibility to start the work. So if you are commuting from home to the office and you are in the rush hours of the traffic, of course, if you are 1 hour behind or 1 hour later, if it will make the difference, why not allow the people to use it? So this was one of the key factors. Then the other one is the telework. So how to assure that whenever it is possible, that we can give the people the chance to continue to do homework so that they can work from home. And instead of go to the office each day, 5 times a week, why not just go 3 days a week or 2 days a week, depending on the role and depending on the maturity level of the people. So this was two of the initiatives that we did, very successful, by the way.
So one last question for both of you, starting with you, George. What's that one thing which you feel you will fix in yourself as a leader so that you are better mentally equipped to tackle this and any future workforce-related issues that we're facing?
I've already started practicing, Sanjog, but I think consciously I would like to be more empathetic to people in my team. I would want to listen to their issues more. And these challenges are changing with changing times. 5 years back, whatever challenges people had are totally gone, and today there are new sets of challenges. And as a leader, I think it's important to hear people, empathize with them, and support them. If you support them, they will support you back in terms of deliverables. It's a give and take. Just because you are employing someone and giving salary doesn't mean the person is going to give you. Above and beyond only comes when you have that bond, that umbilical cord with the team. Otherwise, goal sheets will only remain in the system. And I firmly believe, Sanjog, as it's the last question, I wanted to put my thoughts here that I think the biggest engagement is the work itself. I mean, we do as HR a lot of this for engagement, but if we are able to, as I said, do good quality work, learning opportunities, and everything, I don't see why a person should become a quitter. In a 9 hours job, in any case, a person is active with only 5 or 6 hours. This is proven. Less than 1 hour people spend on grey matter. 1 to 2 hours they spend in planning, and 3 to 4 hours they spend in execution. 2 to 4 hours goes in idle. When I'm idle, that is when the networking happens, the gossip happens, the food break happens, the loo break happens, everything happens during that time. And that is a social time. That's the most important time to engage with people. So how do we utilize that time? Do we give them some learning opportunities? Do we give them some volunteering opportunities? Do we do some connect events? So how do we utilize that idle time is what makes all the difference, and if we have a planned way of utilizing that time, I think people would never become quitters.
Paulo?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with George. I use a different word, but with the same meaning, is how you can create trust between the parties. Okay? If the workers trust the rhythm of our work, they will be committed with the team and with the company. Of course, the tricky thing is how can we allow them to trust on the project, on the business project. And it's done with several initiatives, namely mentoring initiatives. If they are the key employees in the company, you should have mentoring initiatives where you will teach them not only the bread and butter topics, but another type of topics that they can feel committed with the company. And this type of things with the key staff will multiply the effect, because then they will do the same one level below in the organization and another level below, and so on and so forth. I think this is not a new issue. This is a very old issue, how to keep the people committed. It's true that the times are different, so the challenge is to understand how to keep the people, how to touch the people. And if you be a human being, so if you reflect on yourself and the people, listen to the people with whom you work, for sure you will find a way to connect with them and to keep them committed with you.
Paulo, are you fixing something in yourself as a leader so that you could become better equipped to solve these problems?
Yes. This is I would say, a never-ending story, but it's to improve the listening capacities and to process what I listen and how can add value to the people based on what they just communicate to. This is the key factor for me as a leader.
Once again, thank you so much, George and Paulo, for sharing your insights about the quiet quitting crisis that we're facing and what are some of the strategies we can use to solve them. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And listeners, please connect with us on social media. Subscribe to our podcast. Once again, thank you for listening to CTN. This is your host, Sanjog Aul, signing off. Till next week, take care and God bless.